Just hold on, Okay. Good afternoon. Today we have with us Chad Morrison, Senior Manager at Alberta Wildfire, Dr. Karen Grimsrud, Alberta's Chief Medical Doctor of Health, Medical Officer of Health, and Scott Long from the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. We'll start things off with Chad with a couple of words about the wildfire situation.
Good afternoon. Chad Morrison, Senior Manager with Alberta Wildfire. So the current size of the fire still is 580,000 hectares in size, and the fire is still considered out of control at this time. The perimeter is estimated at just under 1,000 kilometers, but firefighters have now contained over 40% of that perimeter, and they continue to work into the fire, securing more and more of it every day. At this time, the fire does not pose any immediate threat to Fort McMurray or any of the surrounding communities. The areas that are still burning are really in the forested areas away from the communities, and due to the efforts of firefighters and we have a bit of a break in the weather, we have had minimal growth in the last number of days. Firefighters have done a great job mopping up hotspots in and around the community and will continue to be on scene there for the next number of weeks. While it's still an active fire, the immediate threat has passed, and much of the burned out area around the community actually make an excellent fire guard to make it safe. We currently have over 1,700 firefighters on scene with over 72 helicopters and over 250 pieces of heavy equipment, which have helped us establish over 380 kilometers of fire guard at this time. So while residents are returning, they will still see smoke potentially in the area, helicopters, water bombers, and obviously many firefighters still working this fire. So we just ask that residents, when they return, stay out of the forested areas to allow firefighters to continue their work so that we can continue to bring this fire under control as quickly as possible. Thanks, and with that, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Scott Long, Executive Director of Operations for the Alberta Emergency Management Agency. We're here today to provide more information on the phased voluntary re-entry process that begins tomorrow, June 1st. Tomorrow morning, we expect the first wave of Fort McMurray residents who have been displaced by wildfires to return to their community. As you know, a number of conditions need to be met in order for residents to return to a safe community. Those conditions include wildfire is no longer an imminent threat. Critical infrastructure is available, essential services are available, securing hazard areas, and reestablishment of local government. The phased voluntary reentry is scheduled to begin at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. We're working closely with the regional municipality and the RCMP to ensure this process goes smoothly and safely. The residents of Fort McMurray also have an important role to play. We know that the people of Fort McMurray are eager to return to their beloved community, but we ask that residents respect their zone day. To ensure an orderly and safe return of residents, the re-entry of neighborhoods has been staggered to reduce congestion on the highways and at information centers. If you go home before your zone entry date, the services you need may not be available to you because, for instance, the gas will be turned on by zone. The current re-entry schedule is as follows. Tomorrow, June 1st, Zone 1, Lower Townsite, Anzac, Fort McMurray First Nations number 468, and Gregoire Lake Estates. Thursday, Zone 2, Parsons Creek, Stone Creek, Timberley, Eagle Ridge, and Dickinsfield. Friday, Zone 3, Thickwood, and Wood Buffalo. Saturday, 4 June, Zone 4 Alpha will have access to Gregoire, Prairie Creek, and Sapray Creek estates. Saturday, Zone 4 Bravo, Grayling Terrace, and Draper. As reported yesterday, homes in Abasan, Waterways, and Beacon Hill cannot be permanently occupied until debris has been removed by the municipality. Please note that these re-entry dates may change to ensure the community is safe to return to. Every day we'll be reviewing the re-entry conditions for the following day. If conditions change, we will notify residents as quickly as possible that the re-entry could be delayed. While some of the homes in those neighborhoods may be structurally sound, the neighborhoods are still not considered safe due to the debris from burnt-out homes in the neighborhood. Tackifier is being applied over destroyed homes in a 24/7 operation to prevent exposure to the ash. The tackifier, as was briefed yesterday, acts as a safety blanket and keeps the ash and contaminants intact and prevents cross-contamination. In terms of travel to Fort McMurray, we anticipate that tomorrow will be a very busy day on highways to Fort McMurray. Our priority is to ensure residents get back to town safely. Please be patient. Please allow plenty of time to travel home, and please follow the traffic rules. Before you leave, make sure you gas up. Gas stations will be open, but we want to remind people that they are limited. There's limited gas supplies north of Wandering River. Make sure you have enough fuel for a round trip, as well as sufficient food, water, and medicines. We will be monitoring traffic leading up to Fort McMurray in real time, and transportation contractors will be along the route to ensure vehicles are traveling safely. As well, to ensure the safety of returning evacuees, RCMP will be monitoring traffic on the ground and in the air, and we also have STARS air ambulance assets throughout the zone. Red Cross will be transporting up to 2,000 people on buses each day. And for traffic information, we encourage you to use www.511.alberta.ca, as it remains the best source of highway information. Finally, we know that the coming days are going to be emotional for many residents of Fort McMurray. Please go to the information centers upon your reentry to get the latest information, cleaning packages, and mental health supports. Information booklets have been delivered to 30,000 homes in the community, and many more of those are available online. Again, please look out for one another and be safe on the highways. I'll now turn it over to the podium over to Dr. Grimsrud.
Thank you, Scott, and good afternoon. I'm Karen Grimsrud. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Health for the province. The staged and voluntary re-entry to Fort McMurray is scheduled to begin tomorrow, with many residents returning to Zone 1. And I want to take this opportunity to remind residents to make decisions around returning based on what is best for their health and the health of their families. We know that residents know their health situation the best. We have completed a number of ash and soil tests, as reported yesterday, and therefore have the information we need to make recommendations about return. We're confident that it is safe for healthy adults and children over the age of 7 to return to areas as scheduled, provided that precautions and guidelines are followed. And of course, the exception being the Waterways, Beacon Hill, and Abbotsand neighborhoods. The air quality has stabilized rather significantly in recent days in Fort McMurray and the surrounding areas. And today the index is currently 1, which is good news. And since the rain on Friday night, the air quality has been good overall. Based on the current air quality information we have, the conditions are favorable for re-entry as planned. But please keep in mind that air quality can change suddenly, and we expect another update on the air quality index today at about 5, and again tomorrow, and those are updated twice daily. At-risk individuals may want to return At-risk individuals may want to delay their return until there's a fully functional hospital. At that point, they can look at returning once they consider the health quality index, which should be at 3 or less with favorable wind or weather conditions. Now, at-risk individuals with respect to air quality include individuals with respiratory conditions such as COPD or asthma, individuals with existing cardiovascular conditions, pregnant women, children 7 and under, and seniors over the age of 65. We continue to measure and monitor air quality in the area on an hourly basis and will ensure that Albertans in the affected areas have the information they need. I encourage residents to also monitor the air quality, and there are tools available with a latest air quality index, including Alberta's Air Quality Index website, Environment Canada, and the Blue Sky website. Environment Canada has also recently released an air quality app. I want to remind residents too that there's only basic health services that are going to be available for some time, and so that residents with chronic health condition, children under the age of 7, and those who require frequent medical care or specialty medical services should delay the return to Fort McMurray. And we recommend that residents follow the health guidelines provided by Alberta Health Services, and a complete list of those are found on their website. Also a reminder that Fort McMurray remains under a boil water advisory, which limits options for drinking, cleaning, personal hygiene, and laundry. And there's also availability of food and other essential items such as medication, hygiene products will be limited. With respect to any health care issue, we request that residents call HealthLink at 811 for any questions. It's been a stressful and difficult week or weeks, and if residents find they need help or simply want someone to talk to, there's the AHS mental health helpline at 1-877-303-2642 or HealthLinks at 811. And these services are available 24/7 and are confidential and free. Alberta Health Services also set up a walk-in counseling clinic at the Syncruise Sports and Wellness Centre. In addition, the Alberta Health Services has launched a special website called Health in Tough Times with mental health resources to help residents and their families through this difficult time. So again, if residents have any health questions or concerns about reentry, they should contact their healthcare provider or call 811. And there's also a couple websites for health updates and information at emergency.alberta.ca and albertahealthservices.ca. And as residents plan their reentry, they're reminded to keep their health top of mind. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a few questions from the floor and then go to the phones.
For Dr. Grimsrud, a lot of people have been wondering about those tests that were talked about today and yesterday. Can you be more specific about the actual locations where those soil tests were and what the concentrations were that you found?
The soil testing and ash testing, and as well as some air testing, was done mostly in the most affected areas, so the Abassan, Waterways, Beacon Hill, because that's where the most extensive damage was done, or occurred. We've got back all the air, and the soil samples are back now. There are some outstanding air quality or air samples for asbestos. Mind you, I would fully expect there would be asbestos in those neighborhoods, because given the age of those neighborhoods. And it won't change our recommendation, those results, regardless of the level.
And in terms of the concentrations that you found, I mean, you said it was unsafe levels, but can you be specific about?
I don't have the specific levels, but they'd be above what would be considered safe for public health. So, and ones that you would need to use some kind of protection, personal protective equipment in if you're going to be going in there. Yeah. So as exact level, no, I don't have that. No. But I guess the point is, we know there's contaminant. We expected there was contaminants there. Testing has shown there are contaminants there. The actual level really is not as a big a concern. Yeah.
We've had a lot of concerns on social media about these N95 masks, and if they are good enough for what people are doing, when do they need to be worn? What types of things should people know about? When do they need to wear masks? When do they not? Is it just in those?
Okay, you're talking about residents here, rather? Yeah. The around cleaning is the main one, right? And that's where the recommendations are. The main kind of cleaning, which we expect most people will be doing for their homes. They should be wearing those at all times. Yeah.
I guess my next question is for Scott.
Sure.
Is that okay? What do you see as the biggest operational challenge when it's going back? Is it going to be traffic? Is it going to be the mental health supports? Is it going to be moving people around, getting those services? What is the biggest thing that you're going to see as the biggest challenge that you guys will face?
Yes to all. At the end of the day, we're bringing back 85,000 people to the community of Fort McMurray. Safety is the overriding factor. We have done everything in terms of mitigation to reduce the risks with regards to transportation. We've done a phased entry to try and provide an element of control so we would not overwhelm the regional municipality and the services that people need. So in my mind, the biggest risk would be people not following the advice and the recommendations of the municipality and the government that we've outlined. But if everybody does what we've asked them to do, phased reentry, voluntary reentry, examine your own circumstances, then personally, me, who has lived this for the last month, I'd be quite comfortable to go back.
What happens if people go back early? You started mentioning it. Will they be turned around, or will they still be allowed in?
The re-entry into the community of Fort McMurray starts at 0800 hours. That's when the information center is open. That's when access into the community begins. So we do not, and again, great question. We encourage Fort McMurray residents to try and time it for that because we do not want endless rows of vehicles on Highway 63 that are going to cause an immediate traffic snarl. There is lots of time. Those information centers will stay open for as long as required. They open at 8 a.m. So I would hope that people take their time, drive up calmly, follow the recommendations that are provided, and there'll be lots of time for them to do what they need to do to re-enter properly and safely.
Scott, you've spoken about September before. Should people expect that there won't be, that September is when the schools reopen, when these people might be able to return to some of their homes? Is that the earliest that people can expect kind of a return to daily normalcy?
Well, to be clear, when I said yesterday, September is an aspirational goal. The Recovery Task Force, working in conjunction with the regional authorities, they're doing all of that detailed planning and work right now. Clearly, the key message is we want everybody to get back into their homes as quickly and as safely as possible. We recognize that in some of the areas of surrounding Abbassans, Waterways, and Beacon Hills, there are schools, there are churches. So there's a sense of priority there to make sure that we can get those folks back in as quickly as possible. And obviously, September is an aspirational goal and a date to try and do that.
What's next, though, after Saturday? What is the timeline for the next weeks and months going forward?
A good question. They're working on a lot of that. I mean, right now, we're talking about 85% of the community of Fort McMurray has been impacted to a lesser degree than some of those communities we've already talked about. So for us, the key is to get those essential services we've talked about. So the water treatment plant up and running as quickly as possible. With the timeline now in June, still very possible, very probable. As Dr. Grimsrud has said, the hospital will be functional. We want that up fully running by 21 June is the target date. The ACO gas electric facilities are still ongoing, but we're very, very close to having all areas restored. So getting those essential services, getting life back to a degree of normalcy in the immediate is the key. And obviously for those people who have lost their homes tragically, it is to make sure they have the supports they need. It's the financial supports in conjunction with our partners, the Red Cross, and interim housing solutions. They're all being looked at right now because ultimately we didn't work this hard to make sure people are safe, to bring them back to an unsafe area and then leave them to their own devices. We're going to make sure that we follow through.
Okay, I think we'll just take a call from the line and then come back to the floor. Operator, if you could put through our first caller, thank you.
Yes, your first caller is Brianna Carstens from CTV Edmonton. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, especially after yesterday's news about the environmental testing, we've heard some people obviously concerned about going back, even from one councillor with the municipality concerned about going back, saying that he thinks that these re-entries should be pushed back. What's your reaction to that, and how confident are you that things are safe in the entire city?
Well, as I said before, I haven't read about this and I haven't been briefed on this. I've lived this for the last month. From my perspective, if people, and again, it's voluntary, everyone's got their own circumstances, everyone's making their own decisions based on their circumstances. I would have no problem with the or all the mitigation that has been put in place. I would feel quite comfortable to go back, depending on what the neighborhood is. I.e., if it's Abbassans, following all the recommendations that have been provided, I would feel quite comfortable doing that. The key for us, based on all the sampling that has been done, is the tackifier. That is the safety blanket that will prevent that cross-contamination and greatly reduce any sort of risk. And again, as Dr. Grimsrud has outlined, if you follow the instructions, the recommendations that have been provided, wear those gloves, the long sleeve shirts, the masks when you're doing cleaning, whether it's whatever neighborhood, then in my opinion, and I'm not a medical expert, but in my opinion, based on what I've seen and all the great work that we've been doing to get people back safely, I personally would be very comfortable.
Great. Operator,
Thank you.
Operator, you could put through our next caller, please.
Your next question comes from the line of Bill Fortier from CTV News. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
I have one quick question for Dr. Grimsrud and then a follow-up question. Dr. Grimsrud, there are members, as we've heard of council, suggesting that perhaps there was some political pressure to open up on June 1st. They were asked, and they suggested June 15th. They feel that that suggestion was ignored and that because of political pressure, the opening was held at June 1st. As a medical expert, are you confident that it will be safe for people in the lower town site, that those contaminants that are in Beacon Hill, Abasand, and waterways will not make their way into the lower town site and the other areas that are opening?
I mean, I look at this as sort of neighborhood by neighborhood, and when you look at the neighborhoods of Abasand, Waterways, and Beacon Hill, and the amount of debris that's there as a result of these homes being destroyed, and I mean, that's where the risk is, right? We knew that the ash was going to be contaminated, so it's the amount of ash, the amount of destruction, to me, is sort of one of the key components when considering whether to return. So for those communities, and that's why the recommendation was that there shouldn't be there people permanently until that debris is cleared away. In the other zones, you do have isolated areas where there was homes that were destroyed, but they have been fenced off. I've also recommended that for homes around those destroyed areas, then they be taken to see their home with a municipal officer and then assess for whether there's any risk to them at all. For the rest of the areas, as long as it's healthy adults, it's no children on the age of 7, no other medical conditions, people can return as long as they use those precautions when they are cleaning. They'll be in no risk to their no risk to their health. Sorry.
Great. We'll just take one.
Sorry, a quick follow-up question. I'm not sure if there's actually anyone there who can answer this one, but maybe Scott Long. I'm just wondering, people are asking, I mean, we know we're in the stage of reentry. When does the rebuilding phase begin? Is there any timeline on sort of when we go from recovery to doing what Slave Lake did and rebuilding these homes that have been damaged and some of the buildings that were damaged, the hotel and other things?
Great question, and I can tell you right now we've already started that work. Again, based on lessons learned from Slave Lake and from 2013 floods, the Recovery Task Force, the government's Recovery Task Force has already been stood up, led by people that have great amounts of experience from Slave Lake and from High River. And right now we're engaged internally with we are engaged in a collaborative effort with the regional authority, with Red Cross, and with the insurance industry to start the process of rebuilding as quickly and as safely as possible. I know the regional authority is already reaching out to contractors, local contractors, to start looking at the blueprints and examining the timelines. Right now, they're not firm, but that work is all being done as we speak. And within the Provincial Operations Center, we have recovery planners embedded. The recovery team, task force, it comes in daily, and starting next week, they'll be getting briefs continuously so that when we do the transition, and the transition is conditions-based, when we hand over to the task force, they will be able to hit the ground running and have immediate impacts.
Okay, we'll take one more caller. Operator, put through our next call.
Certainly, your next caller is Chris Van Den Breek from Mix 103.7. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Hi there. I have a short-term question and a longer-term question. So short-term-wise, I understand that the tackifier has not been fully applied yet, so there are still some uncovered areas. It's been pretty windy here over the past few days up in Fort Mac. So is there a danger from that wind blowing the contaminants into other areas of town?
So you're right. The tackifier has been applied to Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, just commencing the work in Zone 4. The air samples that were taken yesterday, the latest ones determined that there were no asbestos particulates in the air. As Dr. Grimsrud has alluded to, right now it's proximity to those zones that have been heavily damaged. That's the issue, but we have not detected from any of our air sampling, and air sampling happens 24/7. We have not detected cross-contamination at this time.
Okay.
And nor do we expect it.
Longer-term question here is, Dr. Grimsrud, you alluded yesterday to there being a lot of heavy metals in these areas, arsenic being detected. Will these areas, once it's been cleaned up, will this stuff seep into the soil? Like, will it be possible to rebuild in waterways, Beacon Hill, and Opsand?
As far as whether it will leach into the soil, I mean, that's beyond sort of my area of expertise. I mean, I'd rely on more environmental scientists for that. But that will be an important part of the reconstruction considerations about taking those samples, seeing what's there once the initial clearing of the debris is happened. So I think it's a little premature just to make that decision right now.
Scott, can you answer? What kind of proof and ID do people need to come back? Will there be people at the blockade checking IDs, going into the different communities, even going into their own homes? How can you make sure that people who aren't supposed to be in those homes are staying away?
Well, to answer your first question, there won't be any blockades. So at 0800, there will be access into the community. There will be a heavy RCMP presence patrolling with security. There will be access control around Zone 4 Bravo, Beacon Hills waterways, and Abyssans for obvious reasons. Those areas are out of bounds. But for Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, there will be access there. There will be RCMP that will be patrolling. The information centers are your hubs in. The Red Cross will be there. We know that some people initially had some problems with IDs, but they were, from what I understand, the majority of people have since rectified that through the registration process, through Red Cross and through GOA officials to make sure they have proper identification. If there is an issue, or if they suspect they may have an issue, go to the information center. And you have residents of Fort McMurray that are there, and they will make sure that if there's issues with ID, that it's rectified there and then. Back to what you said, there will be RCMP, and there were over 300 RCMP that will be actively patrolling throughout Fort McMurray. And my point of view is the more residents that get back, the more eyes you have, and the less chance of anybody doing anything nefarious in the area.
Is there a chance that at some point residents will be forced out again?
In my opinion, no. I mean, we've done the conditions check. I can foresee no reason why that would happen. As Chad has already said, one of the issues that flared up on 16 May was the wildfire that took a run, but all of the fuel has been burned up in that area. The weather the last few days has really given them a great opportunity to get boots on the ground and to put in that cat guards in all those critical areas. So, my opinion, as emergency management professional, I do not see anything right now. Again, we do the conditions check every day. As an example, if the tackifier machine breaks down, that could be a reason to delay. If there is God forbid, a bad crash on Highway 63 that delays people, that would be a conditions check that we would have to look at. So there are certain things that we have accounted for, we hope won't happen, but those could change the re-entry timelines. And again, everything we put in place is designed to mitigate that from happening.
Great. Operator, maybe we'll put through one more caller from the phone, please.
Certainly. Your next call comes from the line of Kim Cook with the Canadian Press. Your line is open. Please go ahead.
Can you give us the population of Zone 1 and how many people you're expecting to hit the road tomorrow and be back?
I can give you the population of Zone 1. I just don't have that data with me right now, so we'll make sure you get it as a follow-up. We've done some modeling on it, and right now the data and the statistics that we're getting through our Red Cross partners who have done some surveys, we expect anywhere from 40 to 50% of the population could return on those days. But what I don't know is if it's, for my own perspective, I have relatives that live in the area that are in Newfoundland. So I know he is coming back. They are not. The kids are in school, they're in a good circumstance, they're in no hurry to come back. So that is what I cannot tell you in terms of who could come back. It could be mom and dad, it could be mom, it could be mom just coming up, it could be dad just coming up for the day to check, or it could be the whole family. So right now we're looking at 40 to 50% based on all the surveys that we have. Red Cross is prepared to transport up upwards of 2,000 people a day. Right now they're registered for about 150. So a bit of a moving target. Either way, we've got the mitigation measures in place to accommodate everybody coming to as few as 30% coming.
I think we'll just take one last question from the floor.
I just wondered if you, perhaps Dr. Grimswood, if you could tell us if there are water quality concerns for communities downstream from Fort McMurray, even as far as Fort Chipewyan.
I know that Alberta Environment has been doing some extensive sampling there to look at that. I don't have really any more details. Scott, would you know?
A little bit.
Yeah, I'll turn over to Scott.
So yeah, the Environment and Parks, Alberta Environment and Parks, working closely with the community early on. Again, I go back to all the great work the structural firefighters did to protect the critical infrastructure. The water treatment plant is producing potable water. The problem is the cisterns, the reservoirs external that it feeds into, they were contaminated by ash, debris, and for a period of time, the filter system in the water treatment plant went offline for a very short period of time, but that's enough to make sure that there could be some bacteria there. So what they're doing is a systematic flushing of every reservoir, one by one, and they've done quite a bit of work to do that, and then they do series of samples each time. Right now, we've protected the cistern system from any water getting into it, and there is no reports of any concern about water downstream from Fort McMurray being contaminated at this time. But this is why we're doing all these the mediation that they're doing and the very deliberate approach. This is why the water boil advisory is in place.
So are they doing testing in communities further down?
Yes, the Alberta Environment and Parks have done testing in the river upstream and downstream. And again, no indications of anything, and that's because of all the good work they're doing and the very deliberate approach they're doing in the community.
Scott, you said 150 people have registered. Is that on day one or all of them?
That's for Zone 1 right now. We are prepared to go upwards of 2,000 based on the numbers that are registered and indicated early on that they could require transportation. But I refer back to, this is voluntary, and everyone's circumstances are different. Some people for Zone 1 may show up on day 4 for Zone 1, which is fine. But right now we're aware of about 150 people that have registered to this point in time. We're prepared for 2,000. We have 150 so far.
What? Just one last.
That is on the buses, just for the bus transport.
Sorry, I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about the environmental concerns from caustic ash getting into the river.
Well, what we did early on, this is in response phase, we wanted to protect, this was part of the protection of critical infrastructure. We wanted to make sure that there was nothing that got into the cisterns or the actual underwater channels, etc. So what they did was they put a protective system around all of the grates to prevent ash, fire debris, retardant from getting into that system. All part of, they're still washing it out, very systematic. This was a mitigation measure to make it that much easier and quicker to do.
I mean, can this ash just get in, to the river from the banks of the river?
Right now, I was there on Saturday, and they've done a lot of work around all of those areas to make sure that they've cleaned it up.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.